Hello and welcome to the American Society of Regional Anesthesia and Pain podcast. I'm your host today, Raj Gupta, and we've got a great panel and co-host to join me today on our topic on machine learning or using machine learning to help us figure out how to do outpatient total joint arthroplasties and selecting patients for total joint arthroplasties. But before we get to our topic, I want to share a couple of things coming up with the American Society of Regional Anesthesia that I want you to pay attention to. These are dates coming up very soon. I'll pop these up on the screen. So first of all, actually, let's start with this one that's coming up even sooner. So the first is a Hot Topics Club. This is if short little live webinar sessions. If you haven't participated in these are great. We have lots of them throughout the year. These are primarily geared towards trainees, so fellows, residents, medical students who are interested in these topics. These are not CME events, and you can register for these and participate in the live webinars. They're an hour and a half long. They're really wonderful, short topics, and I think you'll truly enjoy participating in these. The next one is September 14th. That's a week from today. It's on opioids. I encourage you to go to the website, azra.com, look for the hot topics, and register for this session. You have to register to be able to participate. I encourage you to do it, talking about pharmacology, indications for opioid therapy, risk stratification, management of opioids, and drug testing. And we have some wonderful speakers and faculty participating in this seminar. So that's the first one. Second thing I want to let you know about is a really, really important seminar we have, a symposium rather, called the Persistent Perioperative Pain Symposium. This is the first time ASRA is doing something quite like this. This is a full day seminar. CME is accredited for this, and so you will get CME credit. It is a phenomenal group of people and faculty with a really broad program talking about the whole process of transitional pain and postoperative pain and the development of chronic pain from this. I encourage you to go to the website, look into this. If you look at the program, it is full. It is a full program all day long, basic science, prevention and treatments. There's even talking about transitional pain service, which is a really hot topic right now, and then multidisciplinary approach to managing patients. And then they've added a session. So if you've already registered, go back and check. They've added something new to this, and this is the patient and surgeon perspective. So I think this is a really amazing, almost a full conference that you can attend in one day. It's all online. You do need to go register for it, and you can get CME credit. Oh, and the date for that's coming up very soon, but you can register still for that. That's September 25th. It's a full day, 9:45 to 4:45 Eastern Time. It's a virtual seminar. And then lastly, our ASRA Fall Pain Meetings coming up around the corner as well. That's November 18th through the 20th in San Francisco. That is going to be a combined hybrid live and virtual meeting. So you can participate in person if you feel comfortable doing that and join us in San Francisco, or you can participate in parts of the seminar, parts of the conference virtually as well. You do need to go register for this. Go to azra.com and register for that today as well. And again, check out the program, check out the faculty. As always with ASRA conferences, it is world-class material, world-class faculty participating in this event. Okay, so enough for the announcements. I want to bring our guests up onto the screen. And first off, I've got my co-host, Gary Schwartz. Gary, how are you?
How you doing,
Coming to us from New York City. And we've got two fellow New Yorkers to join him today. We got JB Liu and Haoyan Zhong from Hospital for Special Surgery. And we are going to be talking about their recent publication. Let me pull that up too. That was not that long ago. I think it came out just last month or July. And this is a topic that's really interesting to me because it applies to my clinical practice quite a bit. So I'll read off the title here and then we'll start talking. This is called Machine Learning Approaches in Predicting Ambulatory Same-Day Discharge Patients After Total Hip Arthroplasty. And I'll give you my context before I get you guys talking to this. So I'm the medical director for an outpatient surgery center that we just opened in January in Nashville. And it's a freestanding facility, completely separate from the hospital. And this is our first location doing totally freestanding ambulatory total joint replacements, including hips and knees. And so we've been doing this since January, and we've done, I just looked recently, almost 400. And we have a pretty aggressive criteria for patients. But picking that criteria and establishing what that was difficult and complicated, and often required a lot of negotiation with our surgeons to kind of figure out what the right mix was. And so you guys are doing this a different way. JB, I'm going to start with you a little bit. Tell me a little bit about the context of where you guys decided to start this study and why you think this is an important tool with machine learning to look at this problem.
Cool. Thank you. And I'm JB Liu from HSS. So everything started, I think, around 2016 when the JAMA paper about the diabetic retinopathy and using artificial intelligence to detect this. And this paper is probably lead and published by the Google group. Ever since I tried to read that paper manuscript numerous times, every time I get a little information, but it really beyond my appreciation. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed that kind of, try to understand more and more about this kind of idea. At HSS, we have an amazing group, and we have some clinicians and anesthesiologists interested in outcome research. And we also have professional support from the department top down, and Hao Yan and other statisticians and who left or joined, come and go. Nonetheless, with this kind of background, we have always thinking about and to do something down this path, because our focus is arthroplasty. And since 2016, 17, I have been focusing on outcome research. My thing is same-day discharge may not be the best interest for every patient. Mm-hmm. The concept everybody started is, we try to push for ambulatory. Ever since 2018 total knee approved, and then 2020 total hip approved, nothing we can do to fight against this kind of like ambulatory practice. We just have to accommodate and make the best out of it, and then kind of like, and use whatever tool we have and guide our practice and for the better or best outcome. Therefore, it's kind of promote this idea. It has been in the back burner for years till Hao Yan joined the group. And then around 2020, and suddenly she proposed the idea that, maybe I can do the analysis. And so we proceed from there, and Stavros Vamsoudas and George Perrin from Mount Sinai, we all chipped in and some idea about how to run this. But Hao Yan is kind of the one who used the Python environment and conduct analysis. And from there, and we took it off. Hopefully, this paper will give some kind of like a idea about what we think about it, how we use it.
Hao Yan, let's talk briefly about this paper. So you guys included a pretty large data set. Tell me about the data set and how you guys started attacking the problem of analyzing this.
So we used NSIP. So the advantage of using this database is this is a clinical registry instead of administrative data. So it's comparatively smaller than large administrative data, like, for example, Medicare Premier. But the advantage of it is it has more detailed intraoperative or lab data or patient complication data. So it was like designed and entered by people whose specialties are in surgery or orthopedic surgeries or anesthesia. So that's why we chose this database. And then it has a fairly, I would say, like a moderate amount of patients here. So that would allow us to apply machine learning algorithms. Like if you don't have enough patients or enough variables, I read from some stats papers, like it's not worth running machine learning models. So yeah, that's how we chose this database. And then the idea we have is, since it only has like around 30 to 50 variables, and then we have a large enough cohort, so we should just try maybe throw as many as possible variables, and then using the advantage of like machine learning models to let it rank all the variables and to see if it can tell us something different from the traditional logistic models or regression models.
And Haiyan, could you give, or JB, whoever is best to ask this, if you can give a basic summary of just the two different machine learning concepts that you use between the artificial, I believe it was the artificial neural network and the random forest models, if you can just give the difference and why you chose those two and how they differentiate, just if you can give a basic explanation, that would be great for the audience.
Yeah, sure. So
and for us, because we don't understand either.
Yeah, the ANN sounded perfect for me, so I'd like a little. I read the paper 3 times, very interesting. But
yeah.
So how about this, Haoyan? You go first. Give the professional opinion, and I will give from an anesthesiologist point of view how I think about this.
Yeah, so I think we chose this models because their popularity, and then because personally, from my point of view, I have never used them, and then this is a perfect data and topic for me to use them in application. And also, they have been shown in many papers. They are the best like models with accuracy and predictive powers nowadays, like accepted by many like researchers. So we chose them. The artificial neural network, this is pretty new to me as well. So basically, this is the idea, like if you think of your human brain, we have abstraction, the ability to abstract stuff. So this is the same. So for this model, we divide the abstraction process into 4 parts. So we input data into the first layer, then it goes through another 2 layers, and then it goes to the output layers. Like this is maybe too abstract. So if you think about, for example, imaging identification. So this is a more concrete idea. You have a picture of a dog, and then the dog goes through the first layer. It will extract the dog's ear, dog's eyes, and dog's nose. And then it goes through another layer. There are only like maybe some spots on the dog's ear that will be there. And then it goes through the output layer. So you only using those spots, you will be able to identify like a whole dog. So this is the idea of abstraction. So this is the first model. The second model, random forest. So it comes from decision tree. So decision tree is, for example, I want to see if a person is going to have diabetes and then I put, for example, age into it, and then the tree is split into 2 parts. If you are older than 50s, if you are younger than 50s, and the older than 50s, maybe the second variable comes in. Does your mother or your father have it? And then it splits again. So random forest is a combination of each individual of these decision trees. The advantage of the forest compared to the trees is that it samples the data multiple times, and then each of the sampling is different. So in this case, this is more robust than just one tree giving the decision. It's like multiple trees are giving you one final decision. So if you can think about it, this is more robust. So it's kind of, from my point of view, my understanding of these 2 models.
JB, before you get to your explanation, I'm going to give you my sort of very, very basic 10,000 foot view of this, and you tell me how much I misunderstood this. So my understanding is that with normal algorithmic evaluations or analysis, there's some amount of input decision that you have to make about what relationships variables have to each other in deciding how to do a regression analysis or deciding how to do that. But with machine learning, you're just shoving all the data at the machine. You decide which rule system that you're following, like in your case, the the neural network, or is it the random forest plots? Which decision process it's taking, but it's ingesting all the data without any structure, any real structure, and definitely no rules for how things are connected. And based on multiple iterations and churning of this data, it figures out what rules apply. And then you compare it against another data set and see if those rules work on a similar data set, but carved out from the original. Am I getting this sort of in broad strokes right?
I think you're right. You're definitely on the right track. Yes and no answer, actually. Nothing is so clear, black and white. So to make a comment first about classic regression model. Regression model, usually you run single regression. You use a cutoff to incorporate the variable into next stage and continue analysis. And for the neural network and all the other machine learning approaches, that it's a little bit robust. You can let the program choose and very loose criteria, and you can let it incorporate, decide. As Haoyan commented about this, is that initially my idea was kind of like, we have been using this regression, for all different kind of analysis, regression this, regression that. I have been doing this since 2013. Around that. So I'm just kind of like thinking, we assume regression can handle the model, but it's in a linear way. What if there are a lot of interactions among across variables? There are other variables we don't understand. Are they meaningful? You use a classic regression model, it doesn't make sense. So for example, just our sodium level, you have a hypo and hyper. Does the lab really mean anything to you? What can you do with that? So the thing in Nscript database is that Nscript data have some of the pre-op demographic information, comorbidity information. It also contains the pre-op lab values. So that's a very information-rich thing. So when we design this, we want to run it. I would just say, let's just include everything, including all this. It's about 40 variables. And some of the variables we don't understand. We have no idea whether it works or not. Seriously. And I'm just trust my colleague and trust the machine to run through it and whether it makes sense or not. The assumption is that this algorithm can handle beyond simple linear regression, either through network or a combination of different kinds of things. And it gave you a certain idea. To comment on Haoyan's comment about neural network, my understanding neural network is that you pick a little bit something from the first layer, you incorporate into the next layer, then layer and layer. Eventually, you have some kind of like just like our brain process certain things. I remember a tiny piece, and that's it. And eventually, I'll get there. And random forest is that my understanding actually random forest is how you cluster. You kind of like classify and cluster the trees. Thinking about this way, if there is a forest, you want to cluster the trees. They may not be close together. How are you going to put them together? Why you put them together? So you have to think about, I would say, like a time travel. If we can grab this tree from this angle through the same space, we grab the other tree, and this is kind of like a random forest.
With the random forest, how many iterations of the variables did you guys go through, or is there anything you left out or decided was worthless, or you just took as much value as you had from the pre-op labs, age, weight, etc., and just threw it in, just out of curiosity?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think we used all the 40 variables, and we did 100 rounds. Is that right?
But why 40 over 35? I'm guessing that's just what the information you had. I'm more just curious.
That's the maximum amount of variable in the Nscript database. Nscript basically is a prospectively collected clinical register data set with a high reliability. So it's kind of like the information there and have been through very redundant, robust verification process.
So if we had more information, theoretically, we could put more variables in there and maybe get a little different determination
Yes, and
for
it's
the future of this research. Just curious.
totally, definitely.
Okay.
And we are in the path of continue doing this with real clinical data, and just hopefully we can take it off from there. It's just a lot of work, a lot of details here and there.
Yeah, my understanding is that it doesn't. These machine learning algorithms will accept almost an unlimited amount of data. It just will affect how long it takes and how many computers you have running the. How big your GPU or CPU is to run all the cycles and how long that takes to run. Is that about right? Like it just, the more data you feed it, the longer the whole process takes, correct?
Yeah, it's definitely related to the sample size. And also it's not only like the variables, like how many variables you have, it also tests like different associations of the variables. Like for example, in regression model, we can do interactions, but it's decided by the statistician. I want to put like interaction here. But I feel like for the machine learning models, they are putting in the interactions where like whatever between the variables, the associations between the variables, they're testing all the possibilities like by the machine. So that also takes a lot of time. But there are tuning parameters. You can set actually how many iterations you want to have, or for example, the random forest, how many trees you want to have, how many splits you want to have, how much like depth you want to have for the model. So you can actually control this complexity of the model, like in some way by tuning them.
And how long would it take to get a data point from insertion to I guess the goal of this for the future is someone goes to the pre-op anesthesia clinic, they get their lab work done, they get everything, and the information gets sent to, let's say, Raj at his surgery center. Okay, you can go here, or no, you have to go to the hospital. That's the goal, I assume, from this model, or no? Am I looking at it wrong?
Yes, you should be able to do it.
And how long would that take or I don't know if it could do it now, but in the future, is it a week, a day, a couple of hours, immediate?
I would expect immediately. Once you build the model, you don't need too much and to adjust it.
So my understanding is that the actual building of the model is what it takes all your computer time, right? And then once you establish what the model's relationships are, testing it against a new sample is pretty quick because you're not rerunning all the iterations. You're just comparing it against the model that you designed. It's whether you want to feed the new sample into the model again, then you have to run the sample, then you have to run the model again, correct? So let's say you ran the model on this sample data set of 60,000 patients from the NISQIP database, but every new patient you wanted to go back and feed back into the model, then the model would have to generate all over again every time. That's not what you do. You generate the model from a sample, and then any new cohort you get, you compare it against or use the model to analyze it. Is that did I understand you correctly? It's like you came up with the formula, now you just plug in the X variable.
Yes, I agree. That's a thing. But another layer of kind of like improvement is that periodically, let's just say, depending on the accumulation of the sample and subjects, and every month or every 3 months, you should be able to rerun your analysis, your modeling process, and to get an update on that part. But that could be on the background, and you usually don't need the kind of like use the peak computational hour to run this.
Right.
But that's also the beauty of this kind of machine learning approach. It could just run in the background, automatically improve itself.
And when you guys tested it, so you took, just so people understand, you took 80% of your sample size and you ran it through the machine learning algorithm analysis. You came out with a result, and then you tested it against the 20% cohort that you left out of the initial analysis. Is that correct? So 20% wasn't in the original group that was fed to the machine. It was left out for testing afterwards.
Yeah, correct.
And that's where you check its validity, is to see if it against that.
Yes, and we also did like 10 cross validation. So we didn't do this 80-20 once. We did this 10 times. So this is
okay.
more robust.
So you took a different 80% each time?
Yes. This is for cross validation.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Gary, ask your question that you were asking.
So my
in the
question
chat.
is, would they have to be different for, like, let's say HSS is a specialized hospital for arthroplasty and orthopedic care. So for the future, would people have to run different systems depending on your area? Like, would this be like a universal algorithm for machine learning, or like would Raj's area in Vanderbilt be different than, let's say, your guys' algorithm or HSS, or would it be the same, or just the machine would just learn over time? Or you have to put in different variables? I'm just more curious for how it could, for the future of this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. Basically, fundamentally, it should be similar, but only if you just consider demographic and comorbidity. However, preoperatively, there are more information and ASIC background and lab values, surgeon, surgical team, practice model, even intra-op information. So if you do a total hip, you do anterior total hip, posterior total hip, you do a 3 hour, and you go to 2 hours and 5 hour surgery, and there's more intra-op event here, and more PVC, and more hypotension, more hypertension, more EBL. I think eventually, and this kind of like a model should be run at, I mean, each institution, which institution's specific flavor. But if you're talking about the demographic comorbidity, the backbone, they should be similar in a way.
Let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to go back up to your chart here. Let's talk a little bit about the results that you guys found. What were the, some of the things were, I think, expected as being important variables: age, BMI, some of them less. I was a little surprised that, race and ethnicity came up as a big factor. I don't know if that implies, variations in care dynamics and, resource availability, if that affects it, or if that has more to do with how often outpatient surgery is offered to different races.
Yeah. So right, basically, the table 1 give you a summary and of these 2 patient cohorts. And one is the ambulatory length of stay equal to 0 cohort, and the other is 1 to 3 days. So this is a summary table to compare whether they are different. Ideally, they are the same, but in reality, it's unlikely. And the ambulatory patient usually are kind of like a little bit younger, healthy, less comorbidity. Yeah, and also
so this isn't tell us which things came out of the model as being important.
No, not yet.
All right, I misunderstood the table. Okay.
Actually, it's table 3 give you a summary.
Table 3.
Yeah.
Let me get to table 3.
For table 1, that's more like standard, demographic, where all the variables we use. We want to show people what are the raw values.
Okay.
And also,
now, talk to me about table 2. What does table 2 tell us?
You want to go ahead, Hoyin?
So table 2 is how the models perform. So we compare the accuracy, the AUC, and also the positive predictive value and the negative predictive value. So for accuracy is we use 80% for training, and then when we are testing it, what is the accuracy? AUC is when you're trying to use to tell how the model are able to tell the 2 classes, 2 outcomes, same day versus not same days apart, the ability to tell them apart. So positive predictive value is, this is very interesting. So this is how correct you can predict a person can be discharged on the same day. And negative predictive value is how correct you can predict a patient shouldn't be discharged the same day.
Okay.
So those two values actually vary a lot from each other. So this is maybe because we only have 6% of patients discharged in the same day. So this is like a weighted database. So this is from 2017 and 2018. So there were not many patients that were discharged the same day yet. But to control for this potential bias, like one group is smaller than the other group, we actually introduce a weighted variable when we are training the models to make sure the accuracy doesn't have to be really high. Like if you think about it, if the model classify everyone into you shouldn't be discharged the same day, it will still have 90% of accuracy.
Right.
And yet it's not, yeah.
Right.
So
Because you only have 6% of the cases.
yeah. That's why we added this weighted variable. So
Got
the
it.
accuracy may be lower, but the PPV and then MPV can be more balanced.
JB, you had a comment
Yeah.
about table 2.
So just kind of like from clinician point of view, when you try to interpret result for any model and all this regression, for example, AUC, and the higher the better. If you have a 0.9, that's perfect. And 0.8 and above, that's a pretty good model. 0.7 to 0.8 are accepted model. If it's less than 0.6, usually it's kind of like a poor modeling. And then for accuracy, we don't have exactly cutoff, but in general speaking, the same principle. So random forest at here basically pretty kind of like, in a way, stand up by itself. And Haoyan point, the positive predict value, negative predict value, and exactly that's what we think. It's just because we only have a very small percentage, 6% patients really and being through the kind of like true ambulatory. If we have more less of stage 0 patient, we might have a little bit better result summary.
Okay, in table 3, Gary, you wanted to ask a question about table 3 here.
So from what I understand about table 3, it's the top 10 for each of the different analysis of what's the most important. So if I'm reading it correctly, anesthesia type is very important in all 3 of the different models. But if you could explain, ethnicity seems the most important in the highest machine learning run. And do you have any rationale for that, number one? And the follow-up is, do you think if we had either insurance data or socioeconomic status, do you think that would be up higher on the list? I'm more just curious. Like, we'd expect age, BMI, we expect all these other ASA status to be up there. I was a little shocked with the ethnicity and the anesthesia type. So, if you guys could comment on that.
So if you look at the right side of the table from logistic regression, and you have basically you can notice among the top 10 list, on the top 10 list, among all these variables, and they are, and the variable we think are important for our clinical practice. So that fits. Then from neural network and random forest, it became a little bit foggy. It's not the same. And I think your comment is kind of like you just hinted the thing I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong. Ethnicity likely represent their environment, social, economic, culture, a lot of different things. Clinical practice point of view, I mean, Caucasian likely want to go home, and if they could, and so Asian may not be. Hispanic prefer not to go home on the day of surgery. I'm just kind of making an example of just kind of like a lucky guess. I don't know if it's true or not, but the different culture and different belief. So Asian want to stay in the hospital as long as possible, get all the rehab, everything done. But everything different. Probably this represents a certain level of factors beyond the control of this data side.
Yeah, I think that, and you mentioned earlier about lab values, and I see that a few lab values pop up. Some stuff that we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about, like alkaline phosphatase. I don't think we look at that very heavily. What it means, I don't know if this analysis can tell us what it means and why it's predictive, but it's interesting that it's there. I bet you that most of our patients don't even have an alkaline phosphatase tested before surgery, so I don't know if that's a sampling issue. albumin, I know there's a lot of growing literature on prehab nutritional status, looking at albumin levels and the inadequacy of people's malnutrition going into major surgery, and albumin is a surrogate for that. So is that part of why that's popping up in the neural network as a variable? So there's a lot to do with this down the road. The thing that's, I think, makes me wanting in this is, yes, we know these are the variables, but we don't know what the cutoffs are. We don't know what the thresholds are. So I know BMI is an important variable, but what BMI? Is it 35? Is it 40? Is it 45? Is it 50? Is it, I'm in Tennessee, is it 55? I don't know where the threshold is.
Or maybe like 43 is the cutoff that we find out in these networks, and that's
Yeah.
the limit. I don't know.
But so it's a fair question, but we make assumption there is certain level of linear relationship, right? So if I'm perfectly healthy, other than my weight, I'm BMI 50, I want to help. You have no reason to say I cannot do it, right? But if I have a cardiac issue, diabetic, all this, even when my BMI is 49, you're talking about different things. So we use, when we first started, we designed patient selection criteria. We use something. So therefore we say, hey, BMI 39.9 or lower is the candidate. Is there really evidence there? I personally think we are just making some rules and we will make it work. But then you say, hey, my patient came back actually BMI 40.1 because he or she reported her height is a little bit, 1 inch taller, so the whole thing changed. What should I do? I'm just kidding. Clinically, you see this kind of thing, right? And the BMI is 50, and suddenly the BMI 49.8. But then what you do?
Somehow somebody's standing a little taller that day.
Exactly. So it's kind of like this kind of thing should be considered in the whole clinical setting with all the information you have. But clinical practice is not practical, and if you do it that way, and everybody will argue with you, I say, hey, Raj, come on, man. I have a patient, BMI 50.1. I really want to do it.
Did you look at my email today? That's what my email said today.
So I'm seeing the whole picture. And with this kind of approach, I hope I can just say, you run the model tell you what to do. And we run it up, run it down, 0 or 1. If you want, you can change anything there. And if that works, I will do it. I may bite my tongue, but I will do it.
Right.
What have you guys been doing with this research since the publication? Because obviously you finished the data before you submitted it. What have you been doing ongoing? I'm curious.
So we have some ARB approved project at HSS to use our EPIC clinical data to run real actual patient. But the slow progress, get distracted here and there. And our goal is try to incorporate more intra-op data. And the goal is that by the time patient arrive in PACU, we will have a number about how possible the patient may go home. If the patient come in with, it's a possibility of 70%. And we will work hard to get there. And but if anything happens intra-op and whatsoever, by the time he or she arrive in PACU, it became 30%. We just say, okay, let's use the resource for some other people.
Yeah, that's a problem when we have a freestanding facility. You have to make that decision before they get to the OR. Because getting them to the hospital at that point requires an ambulance drive for them to stay over.
And
different scenario.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think this is terribly exciting. I think that what we're going to find in the next 5 to 10 years is that we're not inputting 40 variables. We're inputting, 400 or 500 variables into these algorithms and getting hopefully a more refined model that's operational too. That literally is like, our EHR is in the background analyzing the variables in the system, taking into account missing variables and spitting out some clinical decision support for us to help make our decision, not make the decision for us, but help us make that decision. I do think that's coming. And I think we see it in other avenues. And I have a feeling it will come in this because there's too much involved. There's too much at stake in these decisions. I really want to thank both of you guys, JB and Haoyan. This is for something that I don't understand. I find it very interesting because I think that this is the next level of decision making, and we need these tools. And so we have to have people like you guys go through the papers and the literature and figure out how to do this, so the rest of us can learn. So we really appreciate it. Gary, thank you so much for joining me tonight and co-hosting. It's good to be back on the podcast. Hopefully we're going to try to do this. I know I say this every time. I'm setting a schedule now. We're going to do this the first Tuesday of the month at, we haven't decided, either 8 p.m. Eastern or 9 p.m. Eastern. We're working on that timeline, but I want to try to do this on a regular basis. So hopefully we can stick to that schedule. But thank you again for joining us. If you guys want to check out the paper, it's in Regional Anesthesia and Pain Medicine from the July issue. I encourage you to go read it. It's very interesting. It will be over your head for most of us, but I think if you read it the third or fourth time, you may have something that you can stick in your brain and learn from. And so when the next paper comes out, then you'll know what you're talking about a little bit more each time. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.